The music was too bright. The chandeliers too loud. Every glimmering laugh and polished shoe reminded Isla Marin that she didn't belong there. She sat at the farthest table in the ballroom, right next to the double doors that led to the kitchen. Servers passed her carrying trays of champagne and gold-plated hors d'oeuvres, barely noticing her. The glittering crowd shimmered under the crystal lights, women in silk gowns, men in tailored suits, everyone laughing too easily. Isla tugged at the sleeve of her borrowed dress. It was too small in the shoulders, too long in the hem, and smelled faintly of lavender and old perfume. Her cousin, who was part of the groom's family, had insisted she come. "Your family, Isla," she'd said, pressing the invitation into her hands. But family, Isla thought now, didn't make you feel this invisible. She stared at the untouched slice of cake in front of her. The sweet smell made her stomach growl, but she didn't dare take a bite. The way the bride's mother had frowned when she arrived, like Isla had tracked in mud from another world, was still burned into her mind. She whispered to herself, "I shouldn't have come." The orchestra swelled, violins chasing the rhythm of laughter and clinking glasses. Couples swept onto the dance floor, turning gracefully under the golden light. Isla felt her chest tighten. It wasn't jealousy, more like grief. Once she'd dreamed of nights like this. Once she'd believed she might belong among the laughter and light. That was before everything fell apart. Before her fiancé, Evan Cross, left her with debt, a broken heart, and 1,000 doubts about her worth. She looked down, pretending to check her phone even though there were no messages. Her thumb hovered over the dark screen. I should leave quietly, she thought. But before she could stand, she noticed something strange. A small shape under the grand piano near the corner of the room. At first, she thought it was a dropped coat. Then the shape shifted, and she saw a pair of small shoes. Child. Curiosity pulled her forward. She hesitated only a moment before crossing the marble floor, keeping to the shadows. The music covered the sound of her footsteps. She crouched down beside the piano, and there he was. A boy of maybe 5 or 6, dark-haired, pale, clutching a small worn teddy bear. His cheeks were streaked with tears. "Hey," Isla said softly, careful not to startle him. "Are you okay?" He sniffled and shook his head without looking at her. "Are you lost?" Another shake. Then in a small voice he whispered, "They're busy." "Who's busy?" she asked gently. "My dad," he murmured, his voice muffled against the bear's fur. "He's talking to people. Everyone's always talking. No one wants to play." Isla's heart squeezed. She knew that feeling too well, the ache of being unseen in a room full of people. "Well," she said, settling down on the floor beside him, "I don't have anyone to talk to either. Maybe we can keep each other company for a bit." The boy peeked up at her, eyes large and wet. They were a deep, unusual hazel, gold in the light of the chandeliers. "What's your name?" she asked. "Leo." "Hi, Leo." She offered her hand with a little smile. "I'm Isla." He hesitated, then slipped his small hand into hers. His fingers were cold. "Would you like to hear a story?" she asked. "I know a really good one about a brave knight and a very grumpy dragon." His head tilted. "A dragon? A very grumpy one," she whispered dramatically. "He hoarded all the chocolate in the kingdom. The knight had to sneak into his cave to get it back." Leo's tears slowed. He blinked at her. "Did the dragon eat him?" "Almost," Isla said, lowering her voice. "But the knight tickled him first. The dragon laughed so hard. He let all the chocolate go." Leo giggled, a small surprised sound that made Isla's chest warm. "That's silly." "All the best stories are," she said with a wink. They sat like that for a few minutes, Isla weaving a simple, funny story while Leo clutched his teddy bear and listened, his face softening with each laugh. Around them, the party went on as if they didn't exist. For the first time that evening, Isla forgot how lonely she was. "Isla." The voice that spoke her name made her freeze. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. That voice had once been warm, charming, and safe. Now it was something else, sharp and mocking. She turned slowly. Evan Cross stood behind her, tall, elegant, and smiling the way only cruel people smile when they found an easy target. "Well," he said, his tone full of false sweetness, "if it isn't Isla Marin. Still crashing parties, are we?" Isla stood quickly, trying to hide Leo behind her. "I was invited," she said, keeping her voice steady. Evan laughed softly. "By who?" "The cleaning staff." The woman at his side, tall, glittering in a green dress, laughed too. "Evan, don't be mean," she said, though her eyes danced with amusement. "Maybe she's helping with the entertainment." Isla felt heat rush to her face. "I'm not." But before she could finish, Evan's gaze shifted. "And what's this?" he said, pointing at Leo. "Found yourself a new project, Isla? You always did have a weakness for strays." Leo shrank back, clutching Isla's hand. "Don't be mean to her," he said quietly. Evan's smile faltered. "What did you say?" "Don't be mean," Leo repeated, a little louder this time. Evan frowned. "Listen here, you." He reached forward as if to grab the boy's arm. Isla moved instantly, placing herself between them. "Stop it, Evan," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "He's just a child." Evan's expression hardened. "You don't tell me what to do," he hissed. "You've embarrassed yourself enough for one night." Before she could answer, the air around them shifted, quietly but completely. It was like the room itself had drawn a breath and held it. A deep, calm voice spoke from behind Evan. "Is there a problem here?" Evan froze. His back stiffened. Slowly he turned. Standing a few feet away was a man Isla had never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that fit like it had been made just for him. His hair was dark, his expression unreadable. But it was his eyes, cold, focused, impossibly steady, that silenced the space between heartbeats. Isla felt a shiver travel down her spine. The man's gaze moved to Leo. "Leo," he said softly. The boy's head snapped up. Relief flooded his little face. "Papa!" He ran to the man, who bent slightly to rest a hand on the boy's shoulder. The gesture was small but protective, and it spoke volumes. Evan swallowed hard. "Mr. Vero," he stammered, color draining from his face. I didn't realize." Cashin Vero didn't reply right away. His eyes moved from Evan to Isla, then back again. The silence stretched thin. "Explain," Cashin said finally. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room like thunder rolling through marble halls. Evan's confidence crumbled. "It was just a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "The woman was bothering your son. I was simply—" "She wasn't bothering me," Leo interrupted, his voice shaking. He stepped out from behind his father's leg. "She told me a story. About a dragon. She was nice." Cashin's gaze returned to Isla. He studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. There was nothing cruel in his expression, only calculation, as if he were weighing truth against deception. "Is that true?" he asked. Isla nodded. "Yes, sir." He was crying. "I only wanted to help." Cashin looked down at his son again. "She helped you?" Leo nodded vigorously. "She made me laugh." Small pause. Then Cashin turned back to Evan. "You accused her of bothering my son," he said quietly. "You tried to touch him." Evan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Cashin took one measured step forward. "You will apologize to Miss Marin," he said. Evan blinked. "What?" Cashin's tone didn't change, but the weight behind it did. "Now." For a moment, Evan looked like he might argue. Then he caught Cashin's eyes and seemed to think better of it. He turned to Isla, pale and shaking. "I apologize," he muttered. Cashin's gaze lingered a second longer, then softened slightly as he looked at Isla. "Thank you," he said, "for being kind to my son." Isla blinked, startled. "You don't need to thank me." "Perhaps not," he replied. "But I do it anyway." He extended his hand. For a heartbeat, Isla hesitated. Then she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm but not rough, his palm warm against her cold fingers. "Cashin Vero," he said simply. "Isla Marin." His eyes lingered on hers just long enough for her pulse to quicken. There was something unreadable there. Interest, maybe, or curiosity. Then he released her hand and turned to Leo. "Come," he said. "We should let the lady enjoy the evening." But as he began to walk away, Leo tugged at his sleeve. "Papa, can she come see the garden? The one with the lights?" Cashin looked down at his son, then back at Isla. "Would you?" he asked, his tone polite but edged with quiet authority. Isla hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, to slip away before she made another mistake. Yet Leo's hopeful face and Cashin's steady gaze held her still. Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." Cashin nodded once, as if satisfied. "Then come." He led them through the tall glass doors at the edge of the ballroom. Cool night air met them outside. The garden was lit by hundreds of tiny white lights strung between trees, reflecting on a small fountain that murmured in the dark. Leo ran ahead, laughing softly, his earlier tears forgotten. Isla watched him with a faint smile. Cashin's voice broke the silence beside her. "He doesn't speak to many people," he said quietly. "You must have made quite an impression." "I just told him a story," she said, feeling self-conscious. "Sometimes," Cashin replied, his eyes on the stars, "a story is enough." They stood there for a moment, the night calm around them. Isla couldn't tell if she was afraid of him or simply drawn to the strange steadiness he carried. He turned his gaze toward her again, and though his expression didn't change, something flickered behind his eyes. An interest, sharp and silent. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Thank you, Miss Marin, for seeing my son when no one else did." Isla lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. "Anyone would have done the same," she said. "No," Cashin said quietly. "Not anyone." And with that, he walked toward his son, his dark figure outlined by the glow of the garden lights. Isla watched them go, her heart beating too fast, wondering what exactly had just begun. The next morning, the sunlight looked strange to Isla. Too bright, too gentle, as if the night before had been a dream. She stood by the kitchen sink in her small apartment, staring at the cup of instant coffee growing cold in her hands. The memory of the wedding replayed in her mind like a movie on loop. The music, the humiliation, the cruel laughter, and then him. Cashin Vero. The name felt heavy even in her thoughts. She had gone to bed thinking she would never see him again, yet the sound of his voice still lingered. There was something about the way he spoke. Calm, controlled, but with a quiet power that filled the air around him. And then there was Leo. The boy's laughter, the way his small hand had clutched hers. His innocent request to see the garden. Isla smiled faintly, remembering how he had looked under the lights. Safe, happy, completely different from the tearful child under the piano. She took a sip of her coffee and sighed. "That's that," she said aloud, as if saying it would make it true. "A strange night. That's all." But it didn't feel like it was over. Later that afternoon, Isla arrived at the diner where she worked. The bell above the door chimed as she walked in, the familiar smell of coffee and frying oil greeting her. The diner was small but busy. Truck drivers, office workers, students, everyone passing through for a moment of warmth. Her co-worker, Lila, glanced up from the counter. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, pouring 2 cups of coffee at once. "Didn't," Isla admitted with a half-smile. "Long night. Wedding," Lila guessed. "You hate weddings." Isla shrugged. "I thought it might be nice to be around people for a change." "It wasn't." Lila laughed. "Well, at least you tried." As the day went on, Isla lost herself in the routine, taking orders, refilling drinks, pretending not to notice the ache in her feet or the faint worry in her chest about rent and bills. Just before lunch rush ended, the door opened again. A tall man in a gray suit stepped in. He didn't look like the usual kind of customer. His eyes scanned the room once before landing on Isla. "Can I help you?" she asked, gripping her notepad automatically. He smiled politely. "You're Isla Marin." Her stomach tightened. "Yes. Why?" He reached into his jacket and handed her a small envelope. "Mr. Vero asked me to deliver this." Her breath caught. "Cashin Vero." "Yes, ma'am." Before she could say another word, the man turned and left as quietly as he'd come. Lila hurried over the moment the door closed. "Who was that? And what's with the envelope?" Isla stared at it. The paper was thick and white, her name written in neat, elegant handwriting. "I don't know." She opened it carefully. Inside was a short note. "Miss Marin, Leo spoke highly of you. I'd like to thank you properly. Dinner. Tonight. 7 p.m. Car will pick you up. Cashin Vero." Below the signature was an embossed symbol, a simple V surrounded by a circle. Lila's eyes widened. "Dinner. As in dinner with him. The Cashin Vero." "I can't," Isla said quickly, shoving the note back into the envelope. "It's probably a mistake. A mistake that comes with its own car." Lila teased. "Girl, I don't think so." Isla shook her head. "You don't understand. Is different. Important. Dangerous, maybe." "All the more reason to go," Lila said, grinning. "You helped his kid, right? What's the worst that could happen?" Isla thought about it. The worst? Probably a lot. But there was something about the letter. Polite, simple, but impossible to ignore. By 6:30 that evening, she was still arguing with herself as she stood in front of her mirror. Her dress was plain, navy blue, modest but clean. Her hair, usually tied up for work, fell loose over her shoulders. "You're just going to say thank you and leave," she told her reflection firmly. "Nothing else." Outside, a black car waited at the curb. The ride was quiet except for the hum of the engine. The driver, the same man who had delivered the note, said nothing, and Isla didn't know what to say either. The city lights blurred past the window, reflecting against her nervous expression. When the car finally stopped, she saw a tall iron gate, opening slowly. Beyond it stood a mansion that looked more like a fortress, grand but dark, surrounded by towering cypress trees. Her heart raced. "He lives here," she whispered. The car stopped in front of the main steps. The driver got out and opened her door. "Mr. Vero is expecting you." She followed him through the tall doors into a wide marble hall. Everything gleamed, polished floors, high ceilings, quiet elegance. Yet despite its beauty, the air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding secrets. "Miss Marin." The voice came from the staircase. Cashin Vero descended slowly, wearing a black suit with no tie. His dark hair neatly combed back. He looked the same as he had the night of the wedding. Calm, perfectly composed, unreadable. "Mr. Vero," Isla said, her voice almost a whisper. "Cashin is fine," he said smoothly. "Thank you for coming." He offered a small nod to the driver, who disappeared through a side door, leaving them alone in the vast hall. "Please," Cashin said, gesturing toward the dining room. "This way." Isla followed him, her steps echoing softly on the marble. The dining room was elegant but strangely quiet, a single table set for two, candles flickering gently between them. "I wasn't sure you would accept my invitation," Cashin said as he pulled out her chair. "I almost didn't," she admitted, sitting carefully. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Honesty. I value that." They sat in silence for a moment as a server appeared, placing 2 glasses of water before slipping out again. "Leo talked about you," Cashin said at last. "He doesn't usually talk much to strangers." "He's a good boy," Isla said softly. "He just seemed lonely." Cashin's eyes darkened slightly. "Yes, loneliness is something he inherited, I fear." Isla wasn't sure what to say to that. She looked down at her plate, then back up. "You don't have to thank me for what happened. Anyone would have comforted him." "No," Cashin said quietly. "Not anyone. You did something simple yet rare. You saw him. That matters. The words surprised her. There was no arrogance in his tone, only a deep, quiet sincerity. Still, she said, I didn't expect a dinner invitation from you. I don't make a habit of inviting people into my home, he replied. But when someone protects what I hold most dear, I prefer to express gratitude personally. He said it so calmly, yet there was something underneath, a kind of restrained emotion that made Isla's stomach flutter with confusion. They began to eat. The food was simple but perfect: roasted vegetables, grilled fish, warm bread. For a while, conversation drifted easily. Cashin asked about her work, her sister, her life in the city. Isla found herself answering honestly, even about the hard parts: the debts, the long hours, the quiet fear of losing everything. He listened without interrupting. When she apologized for talking too much, he said, People rarely speak honestly around me. I find it refreshing. You make that sound lonely, she said before she could stop herself. Cashin's gaze flicked up to meet hers. Perhaps it is. Something in his expression softened for just a second, the faintest trace of sadness behind his composure. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. After dinner, they walked through the hall to the back terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. Beyond the terrace, city lights shimmered in the distance. Leo was already there, sitting cross-legged on the ground beside a small fountain. When he saw Isla, he jumped up. You came. I did, Isla said, smiling. You didn't think I'd forget you, did you? Leo grinned and held up a toy car. Papa said I could stay up until you came. Look, it lights up. She laughed softly as he pressed a button, the tiny headlights glowing blue. It's wonderful, Leo. Cashin stood nearby, watching quietly. He's been asking about you all week, he said. You've made an impression. Isla glanced at Leo, then at Cashin. He's sweet. You should be proud. I am, Cashin said, his voice low. But I'm not always the kind of father he deserves. You're trying, Isla said. That matters more than you think. Cashin studied her for a moment. You speak as if you know. She hesitated, then nodded. My parents died when I was young. My sister and I grew up with relatives who didn't really want us. I know what it feels like to be someone's duty instead of their joy. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked out over the garden lights, his expression thoughtful. That, he said finally, is why he trusts you. The three of them stayed there for a while, Leo talking about his toy, Isla listening, Cashin silent but present. It felt strange and peaceful at the same time. When it grew late, Leo began to yawn. Cashin lifted him effortlessly into his arms. Say good night, he murmured. Good night, Isla, Leo said sleepily, his head resting on his father's shoulder. Good night, Leo. She touched his hand gently. Dream about dragons, okay? He smiled drowsily. Only the friendly ones. Cashin carried him upstairs, then returned a few minutes later. The silence between them now felt heavier, not uncomfortable, but charged with something unnamed. You should know, Cashin said quietly. People will talk about you and me. They always talk. Let them, Isla said before she could think. Then she blushed. I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong. He watched her for a long moment, the faintest shadow of a smile touching his lips. No, he said softly. You're not. He stepped closer, not too near, just enough that she could smell the faint scent of his cologne. Clean, dark, unfamiliar. Thank you for coming tonight, he said. If you ever need anything at all, my door is open. I don't think I'd ever have a reason to need anything from you, Isla said lightly, trying to smile. Cashin's gaze didn't waver. Perhaps not now. There was something in the way he said it. Not a threat, not even a promise, but something certain. Something that made Isla's pulse quicken. He escorted her to the car, his hand steady on the door. As she got in, he said quietly, You have a kind heart, Miss Marin. In my world, that's both a gift and a danger. The door closed with a soft click. As the car drove away, Isla looked back through the window. Cashin stood on the steps, one hand in his pocket, the other resting loosely at his side. He watched until the car disappeared around the bend. Inside the moving car, Isla pressed her fingers to her chest. Her heart was still beating too fast, and she didn't know why. The days after her dinner at Cashinvero's mansion moved like a strange dream, both ordinary and unsettling. Isla went to work as usual, wiped tables, served coffee, smiled at customers. On the surface, nothing had changed. But whispers followed her. First she thought she imagined it. The way co-workers paused mid-conversation when she entered, the curious looks from customers who never used to notice her. Even her boss, usually gruff and distracted, suddenly treated her with stiff politeness. By Thursday, she knew something was different. Lila cornered her behind the counter during lunch rush. "Okay," she whispered urgently. "Spill. What's going on?" "What do you mean?" Isla asked, confused. "You know exactly what I mean. Yesterday this guy in a suit came in. Black car outside, the kind with tinted windows. He asked if you'd be in today. Didn't say his name, but come on Isla, who else could it be?" Isla froze, holding the coffee pot midair. "You're saying someone came here?" Lila nodded. "And he tipped the waiter $100 for nothing. He said it was for good service to Miss Marin." Isla's stomach dropped. She didn't need to guess who it was. Cashinvero didn't just thank people. He made sure the world knew who he was grateful to. "I didn't ask for that," Isla said quickly, panic rising. "I know," Lila said, lowering her voice. "But people are talking, Isla. They say you're..." She hesitated. "Say I'm what?" "Seeing him." The words hit like a shock. Isla nearly laughed from disbelief. "That's ridiculous. We had dinner once. Dinner to say thank you." Lila raised an eyebrow. "A thank you dinner with Cashinvero at his house with his kid there? That's not how he thanks people, Isla. Everyone knows who he is." "Who he is?" Isla repeated. Lila glanced around, then leaned closer. "You really don't know, do you?" Isla shook her head. Lila lowered her voice until it was barely a whisper. "Cashinvero isn't just rich. He owns half the city. Businesses, clubs, warehouses. And people say he's connected to other things. Dangerous things." Isla frowned. "Rumors." "Maybe. But the kind of rumors people don't make up for fun." They both went quiet. The sound of dishes clinking and the hum of conversation filled the silence. When Isla finally looked out the window, her heart stuttered. Across the street, parked half in shadow, was a familiar black car. That night, when she got home, an envelope waited under her apartment door. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper with elegant handwriting. "You're safe. Don't worry about the car. It's there to make sure no one bothers you again. ZV." She sank onto the couch, the note fluttering in her lap. If the word should have comforted her. But it didn't. She folded the note and stared out the window. The car's lights glowed faintly in the dark street. It wasn't threatening. Just existed. Watching. Her thoughts tangled between fear and something else, something like relief. No one had ever cared enough to protect her. No one had ever noticed her enough to think she might need it. She fell asleep that night with the note on her bedside table and dreams full of dark eyes watching from shadows. The next morning she woke to knocking. It wasn't the heavy knock of a stranger, but a polite, measured one. She opened the door to find a woman standing there, tall, graceful, dressed in a black coat. "Miss Marin?" the woman asked. "Yes. I work for Mr. Vero," she said. "He asked me to deliver something." She handed Isla a small box tied with a ribbon. "What is it?" Isla asked, hesitant. "An apology," the woman said with a faint smile. "For the rumors. He didn't mean to cause trouble for you." Before Isla could say anything, the woman turned and walked away, her heels tapping quietly on the stairs. Isla closed the door, heart racing. She untied the ribbon carefully. Inside the box was a phone. Sleek, new, expensive. A note was taped to it. In case you ever need to reach me. Only me. Isla set the box down and pressed a hand to her chest. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or trapped. That evening, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone. Part of her wanted to return it. Another part whispered that she might need it. She thought about Leo's laughter, Cashin's calm voice, the quiet way he'd said thank you for seeing my son. Maybe he wasn't as dangerous as people thought. Maybe he was just complicated. When the phone vibrated suddenly, she nearly dropped it. A message appeared. Did my assistant deliver the box safely? Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed back. You didn't have to send it. A moment later. I wanted to. Are you well? She hesitated, then wrote. I'm fine. Just trying to keep up with work. Work can wait, came the reply. Dinner again tomorrow. My driver will come at 7. She stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Before she could decide what to say, another message appeared. Please say yes, Isla. Her name on his screen made her chest tighten. After a long pause, she typed one word. B. When the black car pulled up the next evening, Isla was ready. Or at least, she told herself she was. The driver greeted her with a polite nod and opened the door. This time, the ride didn't feel as tense. She knew where they were going, what to expect, or so she thought. But when they reached the estate, Cashin wasn't waiting in the hall as before. Instead, the same woman who'd delivered the phone met her at the door. Mr. Vero will be with you shortly, she said. He's finishing a meeting. Isla followed her into a sunlit room lined with bookshelves and soft chairs. A tray of tea and pastries waited on the table. She sat down, glancing around. The house looked different in daylight, less intimidating though still too perfect. Through the window, she could see a garden stretching out behind the mansion, full of marble statues and tall hedges. After a few minutes, small footsteps pattered behind her. Isla! She turned, smiling automatically. Leo! He ran up and hugged her around the waist. Papa said you were coming again. I guess he was right, she said, laughing softly. Leo grinned up at her. Can I show you something? Of course. He took her hand eagerly and pulled her toward the garden. Outside, sunlight spilled across the grass. He led her to a small wooden shed tucked behind the trees. Inside were toys, books, and a half-finished model airplane. I'm building this, he said proudly. Papa said when it's done, we'll fly it together. It's beautiful, Isla said, kneeling to look closer. You're very talented. He shrugged. Papa helps with the hard parts. He knows how to fix everything. She smiled faintly. He seems like he would. They spent nearly an hour in the garden, Leo talking non-stop about his projects and favorite stories. For a little while, Isla forgot about everything else. The whispers, the fear, the strange power Cashin carried. When Leo ran ahead to fetch something, Isla stood alone for a moment. She could hear faint voices from the house, men talking in low tones. Then the door opened and Cashin stepped out. He wore no jacket, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. The evening light caught in his dark hair. His eyes found her instantly. Leo seems happy, he said, his voice calm as always. He is, Isla said. You're raising a good boy. Cashin's expression softened slightly. I'm trying. There was a pause. The breeze rustled the leaves above them. I didn't mean for people to talk about you, he said quietly. I should have known my name draws attention. It's not your fault, Isla said quickly. People always find something to talk about. He looked at her for a long moment. Still, you shouldn't be made uncomfortable because of me. You didn't make me uncomfortable, she said before she could stop herself. Then she added, not really. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or something deeper. Not really, he repeated. I'll take that as progress. They both laughed softly. The tension between them eased a little. Leo came running back with a drawing clutched in his hands. "Look, I drew you." Isla took the paper gently. The drawing was messy but sweet. 3 stick figures holding hands. Leo, Cashin and her. Cashin looked over her shoulder. "You've been busy," he said to his son. Leo grinned. "We're friends now." Isla smiled, though her heart ached in an unfamiliar way. "Yes," she said. "We are." That evening, Cashin invited her to stay for dinner again. This time it was less formal, just the 3 of them in a smaller dining room. The food was simple, the conversation lighter. Leo told stories, Cashin listened. Isla laughed more than she had in weeks. At one point, Cashin excused himself to take a phone call. Isla watched him from across the room. His posture straight, voice quiet but commanding. Whoever was on the other end of the line spoke fast. Cashin interrupted with a single sentence that ended the discussion. When he hung up and turned back to her, his face was calm again, but his eyes carried something heavy. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Just work." But she could tell it wasn't that simple. After dinner, Cashin walked her to the car. The air outside was cool, the garden lights soft and golden. "Leo will ask for you again tomorrow," Cashin said. "You've become his favorite person." "He's easy to love," Isla said quietly. Cashin's gaze held hers. "So are you." She looked away, heat rising to her cheeks. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because they sound like promises." He smiled faintly. "Maybe they are." The driver opened the car door, but Cashin didn't step back immediately. Instead he said, "I know what people say about me, Isla. You don't need to be afraid." "I'm not afraid," she said honestly. "I just don't understand you." "Good," he murmured. "Keep it that way for now." She frowned slightly. "That's not very reassuring." Cashin's smile deepened, soft, mysterious. "No, but it's honest." As she sat in the car, he leaned forward just enough for his words to reach her. "Be careful, Isla. The world notices you now." Then he stepped back and the door closed. The car rolled down the long driveway, through the open gates, and into the quiet streets. Isla pressed her forehead against the window, her heart restless. Somewhere between fear and fascination, she realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. She didn't want to stop seeing him. For the next several days, life slipped into a rhythm that felt both strange and comforting. Isla woke early, worked long hours at the diner, then came home to find some quiet message or token from Cashin waiting for her. A small bouquet, a note, once even a book with a ribbon tucked between the pages. Each gift came with the same neat handwriting. "For when the world feels too heavy." Heavy. She told herself she didn't read too much into it, that it was just gratitude. Yet when her phone buzzed with his messages, her pulse always quickened. Leo would often send photos through the same phone Cashin had given her. His drawings, his toys, sometimes a picture of his father's big black dog sleeping beside him. Each photo made her smile. Each one drew her further into their world. But not everyone was happy about it. At the diner, Lila pulled her aside again one afternoon. "You've got to be careful, Isla." "I am," Isla said. Lila folded her arms. "No, I mean really careful. People are watching you now. Yesterday a man came in, didn't order anything, just sat there and stared. When I asked if he needed help, he said he was keeping an eye out for Miss Marin. He even flashed some kind of badge I've never seen before." Isla's stomach turned cold. "A badge?" "Yeah. Weird symbol on it. Said it was security clearance. When I told him you weren't here, he left." Isla sighed. "It's Cashin. He's just making sure I'm safe." "Safe?" Lila's eyebrows shot up. "That doesn't sound like safe, it sounds like guarded." Isla wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. That evening, as she walked home, she noticed the same black car parked half a block behind her. The headlights flicked on when she turned onto her street. Her pulse thudded in her ears. When she reached her door, she stopped and turned. The car didn't move. "All right," she said aloud, mostly to steady her voice. "If you're going to follow me, you might as well say something." A man stepped out, tall, expressionless, dressed in black. "Miss Marin," he said. "Mr. Vero asked me to make sure you got home safely." "I did," she said tightly. "You can go now." He inclined his head. "As you wish." Then he returned to the car and drove away. Isla stood in the doorway long after the taillights disappeared. She should have felt angry, but what she felt instead was conflicted. Somewhere between comfort and fear, safety and surrender. The next morning her phone rang early. Cashin's name glowed on the screen. She hesitated before answering. "Hello. Did something happen last night?" His voice was calm but edged with concern. "You mean the man following me?" "Yes. I told my driver to make sure you got home safely. He reported that you seemed upset." "I don't like being watched," she said. "I understand," Cashin said. "But there are people who might see you as a way to get to me. I won't take that risk." "You think someone would actually hurt me?" He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I think the world is more dangerous than you realize. Please let me protect you." Isla leaned against the counter, torn between gratitude and unease. "You make it sound like I'm in the middle of something I don't even understand." "You are," Cashin said quietly. "But I won't let it touch you." Before she could respond, Leo's cheerful voice came through the line in the background. "Papa, tell her I finished the airplane." Cashin's tone softened immediately. "Leo says he wants you to see it." Isla smiled despite herself. "Tell him I'll come soon." "You can tell him yourself," Cashin said. "Dinner. Tonight." She started to protest, but he added gently. "He won't take no for an answer." And just like that she couldn't refuse. When the car pulled up that evening, Isla's nerves had settled into a strange calm. She'd chosen a simple white dress, the kind that made her feel clean and unpretentious. The gates opened, and she was driven through the long drive lined with lanterns. Cashin waited at the door himself this time. No assistant, no formality. "You came," he said, and for once his voice carried something close to warmth. "I said I would," she replied. "Leo's been talking about nothing else since morning." Inside, she heard the boy's voice echoing down the hall. "Isla." He ran to her, holding something wrapped in tissue paper. "It's for you." She took it carefully. Inside was the model airplane, painted in bright blue and gold. "It's beautiful," she said. "You finished it." "Papa helped," Leo said proudly. Cashin smiled faintly. "He insisted you should be the first to see it fly." "Then let's see it fly," Isla said. They went out into the garden together, the last of the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Leo ran ahead, laughing, the plane held high. When he threw it, it sailed smoothly through the air, circling before landing gently on the grass. Isla clapped. "That was perfect." Leo's grin lit up the garden. "Can we do it again?" Cashin's expression softened in a way Isla hadn't seen before. "Once more," he said. They stayed outside until the sky darkened and the lights along the garden path flickered on. When Leo grew sleepy, Cashin scooped him up and carried him inside. "Come," he said quietly. "He'll want to say good night before he sleeps." In Leo's room, Isla helped tuck him in. The boy yawned, clutching his teddy bear. "Will you come again?" he mumbled. "Yes," Isla said softly. "Whenever you want. Promise. Promise." He smiled, eyes already closing. Cashin turned off the lamp and motioned for her to follow him back downstairs. The house was quiet now, the hum of night settling in. They sat in a smaller room this time, near a tall window overlooking the city. A single lamp cast warm light across the dark wood walls. "Thank you," Cashin said, "for being kind to him." "I like spending time with him," Isla said. "He's wonderful." "He's all I have," Cashin said simply. "And I don't trust easily. But with you, He stopped himself, as if choosing his words carefully. With you he's at peace. Isla looked down at her hands. That's not something I've heard very often. You should hear it more, he said. There was a pause, filled only by the faint ticking of a clock. Tell me something, Isla said quietly. Why do people fear you? Cashin's expression didn't change. Because fear is easier than understanding. Is what they say true? About what you do? He leaned back, folding his hands. People will always make stories about power. I don't correct them. It keeps them at a distance. That sounds lonely. It is. His honesty startled her. She met his gaze, searching for any sign of falsehood, but found none. I don't want you to be afraid of me, he said finally. I'm not, she said. Not of you. He tilted his head slightly. Then what are you afraid of? She hesitated. Of how easily I trust you. Cashin's eyes softened. That's not a weakness, Isla. It feels like one. Maybe, he said quietly. But sometimes trust is the only brave thing left to give. Their eyes held, and the silence between them deepened until the world outside seemed to disappear. Then Cashin looked away, breaking the spell. I had this room built because it faces east. In the morning, the first light hits right there. He nodded toward the window. Leo says it makes the house less cold. Isla smiled. He's right. It does. Cashin turned back to her. You remind me of that light sometimes. She blinked. That's kind of you to say. It's not kindness. It's truth. Her heart stumbled in her chest. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you make it sound like more than it is. Cashin smiled faintly. Maybe it already is more. They talked for hours. About books, about Leo's school, even about her late sister Sarah. Cashin didn't interrupt, didn't offer pity. He listened, which was rarer and somehow more healing. When she finished speaking, he said quietly, You carry a lot alone. I'm used to it, she said. You don't have to be. Something in his tone made her throat tighten. She looked away. You barely know me. Sometimes that makes it easier to see clearly. He stood then, moving to the window. The city lights stretched below like stars caught in glass. You've changed my house, he said. She frowned. What do you mean? It's quieter but not empty. For years, silence here meant isolation. Now it feels, he paused, alive. The words hung in the air between them. I should go, Isla said softly. It's late. Cashin turned. I'll have my driver take you. She nodded, rising to her feet. He walked her to the door, the echo of their steps filling the long hallway. At the threshold, she hesitated. Cashin. He stopped waiting. You don't have to keep sending people to watch me. I don't like being followed. I'll tell them to be less visible, he said. But they'll still be there. Why? His gaze held hers, dark and steady. Because I've learned that when you care about something rare, you protect it. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. He stepped closer, his voice lower. Don't mistake caution for control, Isla. I don't want to own your life. I just want to keep it safe. Her pulse raced. You can't protect everyone forever. Maybe not. But I can try. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Cashin opened the door. Good night, Isla. Good night. As she stepped into the car, she turned back. Cashin stood in the doorway, watching as before. His figure framed by the warm light behind him. For the first time, she didn't feel like a guest in his world. She felt like part of it, fragile, uncertain but real. The car drove off, the night swallowing the mansion's lights. Isla leaned back, her mind whirling with everything unsaid. She told herself she was still in control. She told herself she could walk away whenever she wanted. But deep down she knew it wasn't true. Something had already shifted. Quietly, invisibly, like the turning of a key in a lock. Rain fell in a thin silver curtain across the city. It drummed against Isla's window as she stirred sugar into her tea and tried not to think about Cashin. It had been 3 days since she last saw him, and though she told herself she was grateful for the quiet, she couldn't stop checking her phone. Each time it buzzed, her heart leapt. Each time it didn't, she felt a little hollow. She tried to keep busy. The diner was short-staffed, so she took extra shifts. She cleaned her small apartment, sorted bills, called her sister to check in. But every ordinary thing felt heavier somehow, as if the world had tilted and she hadn't found her balance yet. It was close to closing time at the diner when the door opened, and a rush of wet air blew in. A man stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat. He wasn't one of their usuals. His eyes swept the room quickly before landing on her. Miss Marin. Her stomach tightened. Yes. He walked up to the counter and slid a folded piece of paper toward her. From Mr. Vero. She glanced down. On the paper, in Cashin's neat handwriting, were just 3 words. Stay inside tonight. She looked up. Why? Is something wrong? The man didn't answer. He simply nodded once and left. Lila, wiping down a nearby table, frowned. What was that? Isla stared at the door. I'm not sure. The rain worsened by the time she got home. The wind pressed against her windows, howling through the cracks. Isla made sure the doors were locked, but unease lingered like static in the air. She curled up on the couch with her phone. There were no new messages, no explanations. She almost called Cashin, but something in her told her to wait. At some point she must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking. Hard. Her heart jumped. She checked the clock, nearly midnight. She moved slowly to the door. Who's there? It's me. Cashin's voice. Calm but low, almost swallowed by the rain. She unlocked the door and pulled it open. He stood there, soaked through, rain dripping from his hair and coat. Even like that, he carried the same quiet control, but his eyes were sharp with tension. Cashin, she breathed. What's going on? He stepped inside, scanning the room. You're safe. Yes, of course. Why? He held up a hand. There was an incident tonight. Someone I once trusted made a mistake. I wanted to be sure you weren't caught in it. What kind of mistake? The kind that ends badly, he said simply. She stared at him. You came here yourself. I couldn't send anyone else. Not tonight. For a moment, silence stretched between them, the only sound the rain pounding against the glass. You should have told me sooner, she said softly. You scared me. Cashin's gaze softened. I know. I'm sorry. He looked around the small apartment again, his shoulders relaxing only slightly. You shouldn't stay here anymore, he said. It's not secure. It's my home, she said quietly. I can give you somewhere safer. Cashin. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Please, Isla. Masking, not ordering. Let me protect you properly. She wanted to say no. She wanted to insist that she didn't need his protection. But the raw concern in his eyes silenced her protest. Just for a little while, he said. Until things settle. After a long pause, she nodded. All right, she whispered. Relief flickered across his face. Pack what you need. We'll leave before sunrise. By dawn, they were driving through the quiet streets, the city washed clean by the night storm. Cashin sat beside her in the back of the car, his usual composure restored. Where are we going? Outside the city, he said. I have a place near the coast. Quiet. Private. She looked out the window at the blur of trees and sky. And Leo? He's already there, Cashin said. With people I trust completely. Something in his voice made her believe him. The car wound along a narrow road, and after an hour, the sea appeared, vast and silver under the morning light. The house sat on a cliff, simple but beautiful, with wide windows facing the water. As soon as they arrived, a woman in her 50s greeted them. Mr. Vero, she said with a respectful nod, then turned to Isla. You must be Miss Marin. I'm Elena. Welcome. The warmth in her voice eased some of Isla's nerves. Leo came running from the hallway a moment later. "You're here," he shouted, throwing his arms around Isla's waist. She laughed, hugging him back. "You didn't tell me we were moving to the ocean." "It's just for a little while," Leo said solemnly, repeating his father's words. "Papa says it's a secret place." Cashin smiled faintly. He takes secrecy very seriously. They spent the rest of the morning settling in. The house was quiet except for the sound of waves crashing below the cliffs. Isla unpacked a few clothes, made tea, and stood for a while by the wide window, watching the sea foam twist and vanish against the rocks. Cashin joined her later, standing a short distance away. "Does it suit you?" "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Almost too peaceful." "That's the idea." He looked out at the horizon, hands in his pockets. "When I was younger I came here to think. It's the only place that never demanded anything from me." Isla turned to study him. "You make it sound like the world always demands something." "It does," he said quietly. "From people like me especially." She didn't ask what he meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. That evening they had dinner together. Cashin, Isla, Leo, and Elena. The meal was simple. Soup, bread, and fresh fish from the morning catch. Leo talked about the seagulls and the shape of the waves, his excitement lighting up the room. When he went to bed, the house grew still again. Cashin and Isla sat in the living room, the fire crackling softly. "Do you ever stop watching over people?" Isla asked suddenly. Cashin's lips curved faintly. "Not the ones I care about." "And how many are there?" "Few," he said. "Very few." She looked into the fire. "It must be exhausting." "It is," he admitted. "But it's worth it." The words hung between them. Isla felt the pull of them, the honesty, the gravity. She didn't know what she was to him, not yet, but she could feel that she mattered. And that was enough for now. The days at the seaside house settled into a strange kind of calm. Mornings were filled with sunlight, afternoons with the scent of salt and wind. Leo played in the garden, building sandcastles from the dirt, while Cashin worked quietly in the study. Isla helped Elena with small things, cooking, cleaning, keeping Leo company. She found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. Yet even here, Cashin's presence filled every corner. He never raised his voice, never made demands, but everyone moved with quiet awareness of him. His calm authority shaped the rhythm of the house. Sometimes Isla caught herself watching him when he didn't notice, reading by the fire, answering calls, listening to Leo's endless chatter with patient affection. It was strange to see a man so feared by others act with such gentleness. One afternoon, as she was hanging laundry to dry, she saw him speaking with two men by the gate. They looked nervous, their suits out of place in the wind. Cashin's expression didn't change, but his words were clipped, deliberate. When he finished, they nodded quickly and left. Later she asked him, "Everything all right?" He smiled faintly. "Routine matters. Nothing to worry about." "You mean business?" "Something like that." He changed the subject, but Isla noticed he didn't take his eyes off the horizon afterward, as if watching for something only he could see. That night she stepped out onto the terrace. The sea was dark and endless beneath the moonlight. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Cashin. "You're awake late," he said. "I couldn't sleep." He came to stand beside her. "Too quiet for the city." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just thinking too much." "About what?" She hesitated. "About you. About this." He glanced at her. "This. All of it," she said softly. "The house, the guards, the way people talk about you." He didn't answer right away. "And what do they say?" "That you're powerful, dangerous. That crossing you is a mistake." Cashin's mouth curved slightly, but his eyes were serious. "They're not wrong." She looked up at him. "Then why am I here?" His gaze held hers steadily. "Because you didn't look at me the way they do. You looked at me like a person." I just tried to be kind. And that, he said, is exactly why you're different. The wind lifted her hair, and she shivered slightly. Cashin noticed and took off his jacket, draping it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Thank you, she murmured. He nodded, his hand lingering for a second on her arm. I meant what I said before. You're under my protection now. Protection, she repeated. It sounds like a cage. Not if the door is open, he said. She looked out at the sea again. And if I choose to leave? Then I'll make sure you do so safely, he said quietly. But I hope you won't. The honesty in his voice took her breath away. Why? She asked finally. Cashin's answer was simple. Because since you walked into that ballroom, I've felt less alone. They stood in silence, the waves crashing below them, the air heavy with words neither of them spoke. At last, Isla said softly, You make it hard to know what's real. Everything I say to you is real, Cashin said. The rest of the world can doubt me. You don't have to. When she looked up at him again, there was something in his eyes, not the cold control she'd seen before, but warmth, fragile and human. For a moment, Isla forgot about the rumors, the danger, the world outside. For a moment she believed him. The waves thundered below, steady and endless, as if the sea itself was bearing witness to the quiet shift between them. Two people caught somewhere between safety and surrender, truth and uncertainty. And though she didn't say it aloud, Isla knew something had changed that night. She wasn't just under Cashin Vero's protection anymore. She was part of his life, whether she was ready or not. The sea mist rolled in each morning, soft and pale, wrapping the cliff house in silver fog. Isla had begun to love those hours, the quiet before everyone woke, when she could hear nothing but the waves and the occasional cry of a gull. But lately, the silence carried something else. A question that wouldn't leave her alone. Who exactly was Cashin Vero? The world whispered about him in half-truths and shadows, but he'd never spoken much about his work. Business, he'd say with that calm smile, and she had accepted it because she wanted to. Yet now that she lived under his roof, she saw glimpses of a different reality. Men who came and went at odd hours, encrypted phone calls, whispered conversations in languages she didn't understand. Even here, at the edge of the sea, the reach of his influence was everywhere. That morning, after breakfast, Cashin left for a meeting in the nearby town. Leo ran off to chase seagulls by the water, and Elena busied herself in the kitchen. Isla wandered the hallways, drawn by curiosity more than intent. She paused before a heavy oak door at the far end of the corridor. It was slightly ajar. Inside was Cashin's study. The room smelled faintly of ink and smoke. Maps were pinned to the walls, dotted with small red markings. Papers covered the desk. Contracts, letters, coded reports. On one corner of the desk sat a framed photograph. Cashin with a woman she'd never seen before. The woman's smile was bright, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She had the same hazel eyes as Leo. Leo's mother, Isla realized. Her heart softened, then ached. She remembered the way Cashin's eyes sometimes grew distant when Leo laughed, how he would smile but never quite fully. That photo was a piece of the life he'd lost. As she set it down, a voice spoke from behind her. Curiosity is a dangerous habit, Miss Marin. She spun around. Cashin stood in the doorway, one brow slightly raised. He didn't look angry, but his presence filled the room like a wave of quiet power. I wasn't. He held up a hand. It's all right. He walked past her, closing the door with a soft click. I left it open. You did. He nodded, moving to the desk. If I wanted to keep secrets from you, you wouldn't have found this room. Isla hesitated. Then what are all these? Maps, Cashin said simply. Of things I own, things I protect, things I'm trying to keep from falling apart. Businesses? She asked. He smiled faintly. That's one word for them. She crossed her arms, frustration rising. Why won't you just tell me the truth? He looked up from the desk, his expression steady. Because the truth can't be untold. Once you know, you can't unknow it. And I'd rather you never have to carry it. Isla met his gaze. Maybe I deserve to decide that. Cashin studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You're right. You do." He stepped closer, stopping only a breath away. I work in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. The kind where loyalty is currency and silence is survival. Every alliance, every favor, every life I protect, it all comes with a price. If I fail, people suffer. People I care about. He let the words hang in the air before adding, "That's the world you stepped into when you took my son's hand that night." Isla swallowed hard. "Then why bring me into it?" "Because," he said softly, "you already were." The meaning of his words sank in slowly. By caring for Leo, by staying, by becoming part of their lives, she had already crossed the line between safety and danger. He reached past her, setting the photograph upright again. "Her name was Livia," he said quietly. "Leo's mother. She died 5 years ago." Isla didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "She was kind. Like you." They stood in silence for a long moment. The waves crashed distantly outside, and the light from the window flickered across the maps on the wall. Finally Cashin said, "You should know something. The people who work for me will protect you, but others might not see you the same way. They'll see leverage. Leverage. Against me." Isla's pulse quickened. "You mean I'm a target?" He didn't answer directly. "It's why I brought you here. So they can't find you." She stared at him, fear rising in her chest. "Cashin." He met her gaze. "I won't let anything happen to you." There was no arrogance in his tone, only quiet certainty. Isla wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the man who'd become both her shield and her storm. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that protection always came with a cost. That evening, Leo fell asleep early, exhausted from the day's adventures. Cashin joined Isla in the sitting room, where the fire burned low and warm. "You didn't ask what the mistake was," he said suddenly. "What?" "The incident I mentioned before we came here. The one that made me bring you." She shook her head. "I figured if it mattered, you'd tell me." He gave a small, almost amused smile. "You're not afraid of much, are you?" "I'm afraid of plenty," she said. "I just hide it well." He looked into the fire. "One of my men passed information to someone he shouldn't have. Locations. I fixed it before it spread, but it reminded me how easily things can fall apart." She realized then that his calm was not indifference. It was armor. And for the first time, she wondered who protected him. The next morning began peacefully. The sun glowed pale gold over the horizon, the house quiet except for the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Leo was humming to himself, drawing by the window. But peace never lasted long around Cashin. Around midday, a black car appeared at the gates. 2 men stepped out, strangers. Elena called Cashin immediately. He came down from his study, his face unreadable. "Stay inside," he told Isla softly before walking out to meet them. She watched from the window as the men spoke to him. She couldn't hear the words, but their gestures were sharp, urgent. One handed Cashin a folder. His jaw tightened as he flipped through the pages. When he looked up again, the calm mask had slipped, only slightly, but enough for Isla to see the edge beneath it. The men left quickly. Cashin stood for a long moment at the gate before turning back toward the house. When he entered, his expression was composed again, but the air around him carried tension like static before a storm. "Something's wrong," Isla said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Someone has been asking questions about you. About where you work, who you live with, what you do." Her stomach dropped. "Who?" "I don't know yet. But they were traced back to a name I recognize." "Evan," she said at once, realizing it before he had to. Cashin nodded. "He's been speaking to people I don't like." Isla's hands clenched. "I thought he was gone." "So did I," Cashin said. But men like him don't disappear easily. They look for ways to matter again. She took a shaky breath. What do we do? You stay here, Cashin said firmly. You don't go anywhere until I've handled it. Handled it how? He didn't answer right away. His silence was answer enough. Cashin, don't do anything reckless, she said. He's not worth it. He's not worth you being afraid either, Cashin said. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger she saw there. It was something colder. Something that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. That night, after Leo went to bed, she found Cashin in the study again. He stood by the window, the phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones. No, not yet, he was saying. Wait for my word. I want to know exactly what he's after first. He hung up and turned toward her. You should be resting. So should you, she said. He smiled faintly. I don't rest much. She stepped closer. If this is about me, if I'm the reason for more trouble, maybe I should leave. Go somewhere no one would think to look. Cashin's expression changed instantly. Don't ever say that again. Cashin. You think leaving will make you safe. It won't. It will only make it easier for them to reach you. He crossed the room, stopping only when he was close enough for her to feel the heat of his presence. You're here because I can protect you. Because I will protect you. His voice was steady, but beneath it was something raw, fear disguised as resolve. Why does it matter so much to you? Isla asked quietly. Cashin's gaze softened. Because I've already lost one person I couldn't protect. I won't lose another. He turned away before she could answer. I'll fix this, he said. I always do. The next morning he was gone. Elena said only. He left early. Said he'll be back soon. Hours passed. The sky turned gray, the sea restless. Isla tried to keep busy, but worry gnawed at her. When night fell, the sound of an approaching car made her rush to the window. The black sedan pulled up, headlights slicing through the mist. Cashin stepped out, unharmed but weary. His coat was wet, his expression unreadable. When he entered the house, Isla met him in the hall. You found him. He nodded once. He won't bother you again. She didn't ask for details. She didn't want them. But she could tell from his eyes that whatever had happened hadn't brought him peace. Are you all right? She asked softly. He exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. You're safe. That's what matters. That's not what I asked. For a moment he just looked at her. Then, in a rare moment of unguarded honesty, he said, No, but I will be. He started to walk past her, but she caught his sleeve. Cashin. He stopped waiting. You can't keep carrying everything alone. He turned his head slightly, his voice quiet. Maybe not. But until I know you and Leo are safe, I'll try. And then he was gone down the hallway, leaving her standing there with a faint scent of rain and salt in the air, caught between gratitude and something far more dangerous than fear. The storm that had lingered over the coast finally broke at dawn. The sound of rain beating against the sea glass windows filled the house with its rhythm. Isla woke to the scent of coffee drifting through the halls and the quiet murmur of voices downstairs. She slipped on her sweater and followed the sound. Cashin stood in the kitchen, speaking softly to Elena. His sleeves were rolled up, and for once, he looked almost ordinary, a man, not a mystery. When he noticed Isla, the faintest smile crossed his face. You're up early, he said. The rain woke me, she replied. You. I never really sleep, he said simply, pouring her a cup. She took it from him, their fingers brushing. You say that a lot. It's true a lot. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the gray sky outside. It felt strange how easily these moments came now, quiet, normal, almost domestic. The world beyond their little cliffside refuge felt far away. Leo's still asleep, Elena said. He was restless last night, but he's fine now. Cashin nodded. Good. He needs rest. When Elena left, the quiet stretched again, and Isla found herself studying Cashin. He looked tired. Not in body but in spirit. "You didn't tell me what happened with Evan," she said finally. "I told you everything you need to know." "That's not the same as everything," she said gently. He hesitated, then set his cup down. "He tried to use your name. Said you had something that belonged to him. Lie, of course. But the kind of lie that spreads." Isla frowned. "Why me?" "Because he knew it would reach me," Cashin said. "Because he wanted to see if I would react." "And you did," she said quietly. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "I always react when someone threatens what's mine." The words hung between them like a spark. She felt heat rise in her chest. Not fear, not entirely. But she didn't know how to respond, so she turned away, pretending to study the rain. "I'm not something to be owned, Cashin." His voice softened. "I know that. But I won't apologize for wanting to protect you." Isla's throat tightened. "You don't have to apologize. Just remember that I didn't ask for this life." He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "No, you didn't. But somehow you became part of it." Later that day, the rain eased into a drizzle. Leo woke cheerful and full of energy, dragging Isla outside to see the puddles. He splashed barefoot through them, his laughter echoing against the cliffs. For a while everything felt normal again. Isla helped him build a fort out of driftwood, while Cashin watched from the terrace, a faint smile ghosting across his face. When Leo ran back to fetch more wood, Cashin joined her. "He's happy," he said. "He is," Isla replied. "Children have a way of finding joy anywhere." Cashin nodded slowly. "I envy that. Maybe you could learn from him," she said, smiling a little. He gave her a look, half amusement, half admiration. "Maybe you already are teaching me." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. That evening, after Leo was asleep, they sat in the living room again. The fire crackled softly. Cashin poured them each a glass of wine. "Do you ever regret it?" "Asked. "Regret what?" "Your life. The choices that made you who you are." He thought for a long moment. "Every day," he admitted. "But regret doesn't change the past. It only reminds you that you're still human." Isla turned the glass in her hands. "You don't seem like someone who doubts himself." "I doubt everything," Cashin said. "That's how I survive." She looked at him then, really looked, at the lines of exhaustion beneath his eyes, the quiet burden he carried. And she realized that beneath all the power and control, he was a man haunted by the weight of his own decisions. Without thinking, she reached across the table and touched his hand. "You don't have to carry it alone." He stared at her hand resting over his, then met her eyes. "If only it were that simple." "Sometimes it is," she said softly. "Sometimes all it takes is letting someone in." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable. But then the moment passed, and he looked away. "Not yet," he murmured. "Not until I know it's safe for you to stay." A few days later, the calm began to fade. It started small. An unfamiliar car parked near the gate, the hum of an engine that didn't belong. Then came the phone calls Cashin took in private, his voice low and clipped. Isla noticed the shift immediately. The easy quiet of the house turned tense. Guards appeared along the property line. Elena started locking every door after sunset. Something was coming. Cashin became more distant. He spent hours in the study, barely eating, answering messages that never seemed to end. When Isla asked what was wrong, he only said, "A complication." One night, she went looking for him after hearing voices downstairs. She stopped at the corner of the hall and listened. "She doesn't know yet," Cashin was saying. "And she won't. If anyone goes near her again, I'll handle it myself." Another man's voice answered, low and uneasy. "It's spreading, Cashin. The whispers. Someone saying you're distracted. That you've gone soft." "Let them talk," Cashin said coldly. They'll learn what soft means when I'm done with them. The other man hesitated. It's not just business this time. It's personal. I'm aware, Cashin said, his voice like ice. That's what makes it dangerous. Isla stepped back, her pulse hammering. She didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. She wasn't supposed to hear that. She turned and went quietly back upstairs. The next morning Cashin was gone. No note, no message. Elena told her he'd left before dawn. He'll be back, she said, though her tone lacked its usual certainty. Hours passed. The house felt emptier than ever. Even Leo sensed it. Papa said he'd be home by lunch, he said, frowning. Did something happen? Isla forced a smile. He just had to take care of something important. But as night fell and Cashin still hadn't returned, worry gnawed at her. She sat by the window, watching the lights of the distant town flicker against the dark sea. When her phone finally buzzed, she snatched it up immediately. I'm fine. Don't worry. That was all. No explanation. No promise of when he'd return. She typed back quickly. When are you coming home? No reply. The next day, Leo woke with a fever. Elena tended to him, but the worry in her eyes matched Isla's own. By evening the fever spiked. The doctor Cashin usually called couldn't be reached. The storm had cut the lines, and the coastal roads were half flooded. I'll go into town, Isla said, grabbing her coat. Someone there can help. It's too dangerous, Elena warned. Cashin said. I don't care what he said, Isla cut in. Leo needs medicine. Elena hesitated, then pressed a hand to Isla's arm. Be careful. The wind howled as Isla stepped outside. The rain had returned, fierce and relentless. She pulled her hood tight and started down the winding path toward the road. Halfway down, she heard the sound of an engine behind her. Headlights flashed through the mist. She turned, expecting to see one of Cashin's guards. But when the car stopped, she didn't recognize the driver. The window rolled down. A man she'd never seen leaned out. Miss Marin. She froze. Who are you? Mr. Vero sent me, the man said smoothly. He asked me to bring you back inside. Then why didn't Elena call me? He hesitated for half a second, long enough for Isla's instincts to flare. Show me proof, she demanded. The man's polite smile slipped. Please, Miss Marin. Get in the car. No. She turned to run, but another figure stepped out from behind the car. Don't make this harder, the second man said, his tone sharp. Before Isla could scream, a blinding light swept over them. Another car roaring down the path. Tires screeched. Doors slammed. Cashin's voice cut through the storm like a blade. Touch her, and you won't leave this coast alive. The two men froze. Even through the rain, Cashin's presence was unmistakable. Dark coat, steady gaze, danger radiating off him like heat. The first man stammered. It's not what it looks like. Cashin moved before he could finish. In one motion, he pulled Isla behind him, his body shielding hers. You shouldn't have come here, he said to them quietly. Not for her. The men backed toward their car. We were just delivering a message. Cashin's voice was ice. Now you can deliver one back. They didn't wait for him to elaborate. The car sped off into the rain, taillights vanishing down the road. Cashin turned to Isla. Are you hurt? No, she said, her voice shaking. Leo, he's sick. I was trying to get help. He exhaled, the fury in his eyes softening. You shouldn't have been alone. You weren't here, she said, anger rising through her fear. What was I supposed to do? He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said quietly, I'm sorry. It was the first time she'd ever heard those words from him. Let's go, he said. We'll call a doctor. I'll handle the rest. As they walked back up the path, Isla glanced at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable. But beneath the anger was something else. Guilt. For once, Cashin Vero had been too late. That night, after the doctor came and Leo's fever broke, Isla stood by the window again. Cashin joined her, silent for a long time before finally saying, "They weren't strangers. They used to work for me." "Used to?" He nodded. "They want to remind me what happens when I care too much. They think it makes me weak." "Does it?" Slash. Cashin looked at her, his voice steady. "No. It makes me dangerous." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the house, a fragile peace held, the kind that came only after surviving something close to ruin. And as the lightning flashed across the dark sea, Isla knew one thing for certain. Whatever this bond between them had become, it was no longer something she could walk away from. Not anymore. The morning after the chaos felt unreal. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with salt and silence. The sea glimmered under a pale sky, but inside the house, tension still lingered like smoke that refused to fade. Leo was recovering quickly, his fever gone, his laughter returning in small bursts. He was playing in the sitting room when Isla came downstairs. Elena was tidying up, humming softly, as if trying to restore normalcy. Cashin stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and clipped. "Yes," he said. "Find out who sent them. No mistakes this time." Was. Then colder. "I don't care what it costs. Handle it." When he ended the call, he didn't move for a moment. His reflection in the glass looked carved from stone. "Did you find out who they were?" Isla asked quietly. He turned, his expression unreadable. "I'm finding out. You said they used to work for you." "Yes. And they thought they could use that to their advantage." "What will you do to them?" she asked before she could stop herself. Cashin's eyes flicked toward her. "Nothing you need to know about." "That's not an answer." "No," he said softly. "It isn't." He crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. "They frightened you. They came near my son. That's enough." "Enough for what?" "For them to understand that I don't forgive betrayal." The quiet finality in his tone made her shiver. "I don't like this side of you," she said. Cashin met her gaze steadily. "It's the only side that keeps you alive." They stared at each other for a long moment, the air between them heavy with things neither dared to say. Finally Isla turned away. "Leo's better now. That's what matters." Cashin's voice softened. "Yes, that's what matters." But his eyes stayed on her as if he knew that wasn't the whole truth. That afternoon, while Leo napped, Isla walked down the garden path that led to the cliffs. The air smelled of wet grass and seaweed. The horizon stretched endless and gray, waves breaking far below. She needed distance, a moment to think. Cashin's world had begun to swallow hers whole. Each act of protection came with a shadow. Each gesture of care carried danger in its wake. And yet, she couldn't imagine leaving. She heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "I thought I'd find you here," Cashin said. "Do you follow me everywhere?" "Only when I think you might fall," he said, half smiling. "Then you'll be following me forever. I can live with that." He came to stand beside her, looking out over the cliffs. "You don't trust me right now," he said quietly. "It's not that," Isla said. "I just don't know where I fit in your world anymore." "You fit," Cashin said simply. "More than you think." "Do I?" she asked, turning toward him. "Or am I just another responsibility?" His gaze was unwavering. "If you were just a responsibility, I wouldn't have come for you that night." The memory of the storm, of his voice cutting through the dark, flashed in her mind. "Why did you?" she asked softly. He hesitated for a long time before answering. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." The honesty in his voice made her heart ache. "Cashin." He shook his head. "Don't say anything. Not yet." A gust of wind swept between them, carrying the smell of the sea. "You asked me once if I regret my choices," he said. "I don't. Not anymore. Not if they led me here." Isla's breath caught, but before she could speak, a shout from the house broke the moment. "Mr. Vero!" It was Elena calling from the terrace. It's urgent. Cashin's expression hardened instantly. Stay here, he told Isla. Cashin, please. His tone was firm but not unkind. Then he was gone, striding back toward the house, leaving Isla standing alone with the wind tugging at her hair and a chill creeping into her chest. When she returned inside, Cashin was in the study, the air thick with tension. A man stood opposite him, one of his trusted guards, pale and nervous. I told you to keep the lines clear, Cashin was saying, his voice low but deadly. How did they find the location? I don't know, sir. We traced the breach, but... Then find out, Cashin interrupted, before someone else does. He dismissed the man with a wave, then turned toward Isla. She stepped forward. What's happening? He exhaled. Someone leaked the coordinates of this property. It won't be safe here much longer. Leaked. To who? I don't know yet. But I'm moving you and Leo tonight. Where? Somewhere no one will think to look. Isla felt a wave of frustration rise. You can't just keep moving us every time something goes wrong. He looked at her, eyes burning with quiet restraint. Would you rather stay here and wait for them to come knocking? No, she said. But we can't live like fugitives either. I've lived like one my entire life, Cashin said. It's how I survive. Well, I can't, she said. And Leo shouldn't have to. He softened then, his voice lowering. You're right. But I need you to trust me one last time. Trust is hard when you keep secrets, she whispered. Cashin's jaw tightened. Then I'll give you one. He took a step closer, eyes locked on hers. The people after us, they aren't strangers. They used to work under a man named Victor Hale. He was my business partner once, before he decided he wanted my seat. Your seat. My position, Cashin said. My control. My life. And now he's after you. Cashin nodded slowly. He wants everything I have. Including the people closest to me. The meaning in his words hit her like a stone. He knows about me, she said quietly. Yes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The house felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. What happens now? Isla asked finally. Cashin's answer was simple. Now I end it. The night that followed was heavy with unease. Cashin made the arrangements quickly. Phone calls, coded instructions, short messages relayed through trusted hands. By midnight everything was ready. Car waited outside, headlights off, engine quiet. Elena packed a small bag for Leo, while Isla gathered her few belongings. Cashin moved through the house like a shadow, composed but burning with focus. When everything was ready, he turned to Isla. You'll go with Leo and Elena first. I'll follow after. No, she said instantly. You're coming with us. I can't, he said. Not yet. If I disappear now, they'll follow me straight to you. I need to draw them somewhere else. That's insane, Isla said, her voice shaking. You're walking into danger. I've lived there for years, Cashin said quietly. She stepped closer, anger and fear twisting in her chest. You can't keep doing this, sacrificing yourself to protect everyone else. You'll lose everything. His gaze softened. Not everything. Cashin. He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Listen to me. When this is over, I'll come back for you. I don't care how long it takes. You just have to believe that. Tears stung her eyes. You always make promises you can't keep. I've never broken one to you, he said. Elena appeared in the doorway. It's time. Cashin nodded. Go. I'll handle the rest. Isla hesitated, her hand still clutching his sleeve. Please come back. I will. And with that he let her go. The drive through the night was silent. Leo slept in the back seat, his small head resting on Isla's lap. Elena kept her eyes on the road, the headlights cutting through the fog. But Isla's mind wasn't on the road. It was on Cashin, on the image of him standing in that doorway, the storm at his back, the weight of the world on his shoulders. When they finally reached a small cottage hidden deep in the hills, Elena helped Leo inside and began unpacking. Isla stepped out into the cold night, staring back at the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, Cashin was walking straight into the fire, and she could only wait. Back at the cliff house, Cashin stood alone. The wind howled against the windows, carrying the smell of salt and rain. He moved through the empty rooms slowly, the echoes of laughter and quiet conversation still lingering in the walls. He paused in the living room, where Isla's scarf lay draped over a chair. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. When he stepped outside, 2 cars were waiting at the end of the drive. Men stood beside them, his own armed and ready. "Are we certain it's Hale?" one of them asked. "Yes," Cashin said. "And tonight we finish it." The man nodded grimly. "What about the girl?" Cashin's expression hardened. "She's out of reach. No one goes near her." The man hesitated. "And if he already knows where she is?" Cashin's jaw tightened. "Then he'll have to go through me." He climbed into the car, his mind steady, his decision made. There was no room for doubt now, not when everything he cared about was on the line. As the convoy pulled away from the cliffs, lightning split the sky above them. Cashin didn't flinch. He had walked through storms before. This time, though, he wasn't walking alone. In the quiet corner of his mind, Isla's voice lingered like a promise. "Please, come back." He would. He had to. Back in the hills, dawn crept slowly over the cottage. Isla sat by the window, eyes fixed on the horizon, the world still half asleep around her. Leo stirred and mumbled in his sleep, whispering his father's name. She pressed a hand over her heart, whispering softly into the quiet morning. "Come back, Cashin." And somewhere miles away, as the first light touched the sea, Cashin Vero stepped out of his car into the rising sun, ready to face whatever waited, for the sake of the woman and child who had become his only reason to fight. The world seemed to hold its breath that morning. The sky over the coast was the color of steel, and the wind carried a heaviness that promised violence. Cashin stood at the edge of the abandoned docks, hands in his coat pockets, watching the dark horizon. Behind him, the air was thick with the quiet tension of men ready for war. "Everything's set," one of his lieutenants said. "They'll come to negotiate, or so they think." Cashin nodded. "No one fires unless I say so. If Hale wants to talk, we talk. If not," his voice dropped calm and certain, "then it ends here." The men dispersed, leaving him alone. For a moment, he closed his eyes and breathed in the salt and oil from the water, grounding himself. Every choice he'd made, every lie, every risk, had led him to this point. He wasn't fighting for territory or reputation anymore. He was fighting for peace. For Leo. For Isla. Footsteps echoed across the metal walkway. "Cashin Vero," came a voice he hadn't heard in years. "You always did like dramatic places for endings." Victor Hale emerged from the mist, his suit immaculate, his smile sharp as broken glass. 2 of his men flanked him, hands resting casually on their weapons. Cashin didn't move. "You brought company. You brought an army," Victor said, glancing past him. "Fair's fair." "I didn't come to talk about fairness." Victor's smile widened. "Then let's talk about loyalty. You took something that belonged to me. Information. People. And now you hide behind sentimentality and family." Cashin's eyes narrowed. "I protect what's mine." "Ah yes," Victor said. "The woman. Isla, isn't it? Kind eyes. Brave, I hear. A shame she got tangled up in all this." Cashin's pulse went cold. "Leave her out of this." Victor's laugh was low, cruel. "You know I can't do that. The moment you cared, you made her a target." Cashin's composure cracked for a heartbeat. "You come near her, and I'll bury you myself." Victor's smile didn't waver. "See, that's the difference between us, old friend. You fight for people. Fight for power. Power doesn't vanish when love does." Cashin stepped closer, his voice steady as steel. You talk too much. And you feel too much. The words hung in the air. Then, as if on cue, thunder cracked in the distance. Cashin gave a small nod. His signal. In an instant, the docks erupted into chaos. Gunfire split the air, men shouting, shadows moving through the fog. Cashin moved with precision, calm in the storm. His focus absolute. When the smoke cleared, only two figures remained standing. Victor and Cashin. Victor clutched his side, blood staining his shirt, but his grin was defiant. Even now, you still think you can win clean? Cashin stepped forward, unarmed now, the weight of his rage tempered by restraint. You had your chance. He struck once. The fight was quick, brutal, silent. When it ended, Victor fell to his knees, eyes glassy with disbelief. Cashin caught his breath, steadying himself. It was never about winning, Cashin said quietly. It was about ending this. Victor's last words were barely a whisper. Then end it. Cashin did. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, the docks were empty. Only the sound of gulls and the creak of wood remained. Cashin stood by the water, rain mixing with the blood on his hands. Should have felt like victory. Didn't. He wiped his hands on a rag and pulled out his phone. One message. Done. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned toward the waiting car. Home, he said. Hours later, in the quiet hills far from the sea, Isla stood by the window of the cottage. The morning light filtered through the fog, and the air smelled faintly of wet pine. Elena was making breakfast. Leo sat at the table, drawing a picture with bright crayons. Do you think Papa will come soon? Leo asked. Isla smiled faintly. He promised he would. The sound of tires crunching on gravel made her freeze. She turned just as the black car appeared at the gate. Leo jumped from his seat, laughing. He's back. Isla's heart pounded as the door opened and Cashin stepped out. He looked exhausted. His coat still damp, his hair disheveled, but his eyes found her instantly. When he entered, Leo ran straight into his arms. Cashin lifted him easily, burying his face in his son's hair for a long moment before setting him down. Then he looked at Isla. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was filled with everything that had been feared and fought for. You're hurt, she said finally, noticing the small cut at his temple. It's nothing, he said. She shook her head. You say that every time something is. He smiled faintly. Then I'll stop saying it. Is it over? She asked. Yes, Cashin said. It's over. For the first time since she'd met him, she believed it. That night, the house was quiet again. Leo slept peacefully, the first true sleep he'd had in days. Elena retired early, leaving Cashin and Isla alone by the fire. He poured them both tea this time, not wine. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For coming back. Cashin leaned back, studying her face. I told you I would. I didn't think you meant it. I never make promises I don't intend to keep. Isla smiled faintly. Then maybe I should start believing you. He watched her for a long moment, the firelight flickering across his features. You already do. And she did. Somewhere along the way, despite the fear, despite the chaos, she had come to trust him. Not as the man the world feared, but as the man who stood quietly in front of her now. Later, after the fire had burned low, Cashin walked to the window. The sea was far in the distance, only a faint shimmer beneath the moonlight. Isla joined him, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? Cashin turned to her. Now we live. As simply as we can. And if the world won't let you, then I'll build one that does. She smiled. You sound like you believe it. I do, he said. Because for the first time I want something more than power. What's that? He looked at her, his expression soft. Peace. For me. For Leo. For you. Months passed quietly. The chaos that had once followed Cashin faded into rumor and distance. The city whispered about the fall of Victor Hale, about new names rising, about the man who vanished from sight just when he could have ruled it all. But Cashin didn't care. He had chosen a smaller world. The house near the sea became their home. Leo thrived, running barefoot along the cliffs, learning to read, building new airplanes from scraps of wood and imagination. Elena stayed on, her laughter becoming part of the household's rhythm. And Isla. She found herself smiling more easily, sleeping without fear for the first time in years. Every morning, she woke to the sound of waves and the scent of coffee. Cashin would already be in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, trying and failing to make pancakes that didn't fall apart. "You're improving," she teased one morning, biting back laughter. "That's generous of you," he said, flipping a misshapen circle onto the plate. "You could just admit I'm terrible at this. I wouldn't want to bruise your ego." He smirked. Too late for that. Moments like these became their peace. Quiet, imperfect, real. One afternoon, Leo found an old camera buried in a storage chest. "Can we take pictures?" he asked eagerly. Cashin raised an eyebrow. "You'll have to ask Isla. She's the one who knows art." "I don't know art," Isla said, laughing. "I just know what I like." "That's art," Cashin said simply. So they spent the afternoon taking photos, Leo posing proudly with his toy airplane, Elena laughing in the garden. Cashin caught mid-smile as Isla snapped a picture unexpectedly. When she showed him the photo later, he frowned. "I look human." "You are human," she said, smiling. He looked at her, his expression softening. "Not before you." Her breath caught. "Cashin." But he only smiled and changed the subject. As summer came, the world beyond their cliffs began to forget about them. The calls slowed, the guards left. Cashin let himself breathe again. One evening they walked together down to the beach. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Leo ran ahead, chasing the waves. "Do you ever miss it?" Isla asked quietly. "The life you had before all this?" Cashin thought for a long moment. "I miss the simplicity of power," he said finally. "The way it made the world predictable. But I don't miss the emptiness that came with it." "And now," he said, watching Leo's laughter echo across the sand, "I have something worth losing. That makes it harder. And better." She smiled. "That sounds like happiness." He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Maybe it is." That night, as the stars filled the sky, Isla stood on the terrace, gazing out over the sea. Cashin joined her quietly, his presence steady beside her. "Do you still worry?" she asked. "Always," he said. "But now I worry about ordinary things. Whether Leo's growing too fast. Whether you're happy. Whether the rain will ruin the garden." She laughed softly. "Those sound like good things to worry about." "They are." He looked at her then, really looked, the way he had that first night in the ballroom when everything began. But this time there was no claim, no danger, no unspoken battle between them. There was only peace. He reached for her hand. "You once told me you didn't ask for this life," he said. "Would you still say that now?" She smiled, fingers tightening around his. "No. I think this life found me anyway." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's how it was meant to be." The sea whispered below them, the world quiet and whole for the first time. For a long moment they stood there, hands entwined, watching the horizon as dawn began to rise, soft and golden and new. And for Cashin Vero, the man who had built an empire and walked away from it, it felt like the first sunrise he'd ever truly seen. This chapter may be over, but their story has only just begun. Every calm moment hides another storm. And every promise has a price. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and join me when the next chapter drops. Until then, remember, in this world even peace comes with a heartbeat.